Hey everybody, it is Trags, Mike Petralia, back with the latest episode of the Jungle War podcast, powered by CLNS Media and our great friends at Prize Picks and the Game Time app. Well, this is a special episode. Every episode is exciting and fun to do, but this one truly is a special one for me on a number of different levels. It's the one and only Kirk Herbstreit. Of course, you're very familiar with him on ESPN College Game Day. His work covering working with Chris Fowler on ESPN and ABC does an incredible, amazing job. I personally believe the best college football analyst out there. Beginning in 2022, Kirk went into the NFL and added the NFL to his expansive resume, working, of course, with the one and only Al Michaels for Prime Video. He's entering, if I've got this right, the third year, Kirk. Is that right?
Yep.
But perhaps most uniquely, and I want to start from a subject that I don't know if a lot of people know this about you. Well, I'm sure your close followers do. You are the voice of EA Sports college. EA Sports college football.
Yeah.
That has come back since it ended in 2014. It is now back. How did that opportunity for you, Kirk, come about?
Well, I started doing it back in maybe 2003 or 4. And so I did it every year for a number of years. I think till 2014 was the last year that the game was active and out there. So when it stopped, it was. I grew up. My generation, we grew up playing those games, and so when they asked me to play it, that was quite a thrill to be asked to be on that game because I love it, like everybody else.
Right.
So yeah, that was pretty surreal. I did it for, like I said, 10 or 11 years, and then shut down for the last 10 after the Ed O'Bannon case. Mm-hmm. And then I'd heard rumblings the last couple of years that it was going to come back. Now the players could be paid. And eventually they reached out to me and just wanted to see if I still had interest in doing it. It's pretty tedious work to, the amount of hours. I do it right now in this studio that I'm in here in Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. In the old days when I first did it for those 10 or 11 years, I would have to, every time I recorded, I would have to go down to Orlando to their studios and do it down there. So it was probably did over a couple hundred hours. It was much more convenient doing it, obviously, this time around than the previous relationship that we had. But I can't wait. It comes out in a couple weeks, and I think everyone's pretty fired up to see how the game looks.
How did they come about selecting you? Just from your work on College Game Day? Was that it? Or had you expressed a desire and interest in getting into it?
Yeah, I think initially, like I said, going way back, it was just the fact that they asked me, a guy named Brad Nessler, and Lee Corso were the first 3 to be on the game. And I think it had a lot to do with just people being familiar with our faces and our voices because of College Game Day and because of back then I was just calling Thursday night football with Mike Tirico and Lee Corso. And I just think the Game Day brand probably helped elevate our exposure. And then it just really in sync with the video game. I went to work on ABC's primetime game at 06 with Brent Musburger. And so I started to do a much high profile game. And so if you're a college football fan, I was pretty much calling the game of the week for several years with Brent. And so Lee stopped doing it, and Brad Nessler and I kept doing it. And then as my career has continued to go, they came up with a wrinkle this year because it's always just been me and Brad and Lee. And then it was just Brad and I. And then this time around, they're trying to make it as real as possible. So they have Reese Davis and David Pollock, and I think Jesse Palmer calling games. And then if you advance to doing a primetime game or the team that you are is playing, a top 10 matchup.
That's amazing.
That's when Chris Fowler and I, just like in real life, that's when we come in and do the game. So we're not on if you're playing Ohio State and you're playing, Youngstown State, we probably wouldn't be on that game calling it. But if it's Ohio State, Penn State, or Ohio State, Michigan, or Georgia, Alabama, Chris and I would be on that call. So we'll see. That's the first time they've ever done that. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that transpires.
You graduated from Ohio State with the degree in business administration, right? 1993.
Yep.
You're an outstanding broadcaster. And I just don't say that to toss bouquet of roses your way. See what I did there with the Rose Bowl? I just don't do that to toss bouquets your way. I do that. You're an outstanding broadcaster. And I've always thought this about you. You have worked with some of the most elite broadcasters in the business, and you just named a couple of them. You've obviously worked with Al. You've worked with Brent. You've worked with, obviously, Chris Fowler. We mentioned him, Brad Nessler. Do you ever look back on your broadcasting career and say, boy, I've been very fortunate in that regard because they've helped me build what I've become in my career?
No question. Really, every step of the way for me, I'm grateful. Every step of the way, I've just been. I started. The thing with me is, I started just really young. A lot of what I've experienced, most people would have experienced that in their 40s into their 50s, and I was experiencing that in my 20s, my mid 20s, and I grew up with Mike Tirico. Mike Tirico was as big of a coach and mentor, a young Mike Tirico, as anybody that I've probably been around when it comes to calling the game. He and I were coming up together, and I'd like to think he was learning from me some, and I was learning from him. And we had an incredible producer who was a veteran guy named Tim Corrigan, and I did that from probably late 90s through 06, so probably 7 or 8 years. And then I went right into Brent Musburger, who I grew up watching. You're looking live.
Right.
Now here I'm standing next to him, and he's probably at that point in his mid 70s. And like I said, we're calling the national game of the week every single week. Back then, ABC went to this primetime window. No one else was in that window. So other than the SEC, we were getting Pac-10 or now Pac-12, the Big 10, Big 12, ACC, whatever the biggest game was, we went and called that game. So yeah, to go from that to Chris Fowler, who really hadn't done a ton of play-by-play work. He'd done some Thursday night games, and he and I still work together from 2014 to right now. And then to go in the booth with Al Michaels. I mean, those are my four guys: Mike Tirico, Brent Musburger, Chris Fowler, Al Michaels. That's it. Those are the only four people.
I don't think any color analyst in any sport can claim what you just put out there.
I don't think so either.
And that, to me, as somebody who's always been kind of a nudge for broadcasting, both in, I grew up with Marty Brenneman.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And I tell Marty this all the time. He is the man. He is the reason I do what I do today. Because I'm an electrical engineer by trade out of Villanova. So I didn't start off in broadcasting either. I didn't even start off in media. But the way Marty could tell a story like the everyman, and I know you are in the documentary about Marty. How much fun was that, by the way?
Oh, it was amazing. I did radio when I got out of school. You mentioned being a business major. I was a business major. I had a lot of opportunities in pharmaceutical sales, Worthington Industries. There was a lot of more traditional routes that my family, my friends, everybody wanted me to go. And I took a $12,000 local radio job, not knowing where it would lead. Had no idea, had no plan. It just sounded like a lot of fun. And if you've maybe read my book or heard me speak, I mean, I'm kind of an outlier. When I was a teenager, most people were into music, which was great. I was into 700 WLW. So if you got into my car and we're on a Friday night, I was either Marty and Joe calling the game, or it was Chris Collinsworth and Andy Furman, on the talk show. And I listened to the post game, and I would listen to extra innings with Tracy Jones or whoever would be on. I mean, I was enamored without knowing it And I think I've been that way since I can remember. My parents showed me pictures of me 5, 6 years old. And when I'm watching the game, like I'm watching the game, there are people talking about the food and whatever else. And I'm like in the game. I've just always been that way. So I think subconsciously all those years, there have been people who impacted me in such a way that it almost became my cheat code to allow me in my mid-20s to almost appear to be a veteran. And I think it had, maybe you can relate to this, Mike, it had a lot to do with just digesting Marty Brennaman, digesting Chris Collinsworth, listening to Todd Blackledge call a game. Like I really thank those guys for paving the way. If I didn't have that and I just went down the normal route and listened to music and that wasn't my passion, right. I don't know if I would have gone into it. It's the most natural thing that I've ever done in my life, more than playing sports themselves. I think it had everything to do with, when I get done talking to you, I'm going to go downstairs, I'm going to watch the Reds. I mean, it's just, I wish I had more hobbies. It's just, that's all I've ever known. That's all I ever do. I was watching the College World Series last night, enjoying that. I was watching back over to the NHL playoffs, listening to Sean McDonough and Ferraro and watching their studio show with Messier. And it's not football. It's just a hobby of mine that I love, and so I'm very lucky to be into something that I've put so much time into over the years.
I'm glad you mentioned Todd Blackledge, because for a year I worked with him up at WHBC in his hometown of Canton. I believe he went to North Canton,
he did.
If I'm remembering that correctly.
Yeah.
But another salt of the earth guy in Todd Blackledge.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Reds. I think people who know you're an avid Reds fan. It began, I assume, with the Big Red Machine and carried on?
Absolutely. I mean, how can you be alive in Southwest Ohio in the early to mid 70s, especially as a kid? And we didn't have a ton of games on back in those days, so we all listened to Marty and Joe. Right. Occasionally, you get the rare, game of the week. No, but I was a junkie. I mean, I kept score games. If Marty said, if you're keeping score at home, that's 6 to 4 to 3 to, I was right there. I wish I could find them. They're probably in my mom's house somewhere, but I have stacks of score sheets that I kept. I knew every National League lineup for probably, 10 or 11 years. And that was fun to me on a Friday night. When I was in middle school, they started to come on TV a little bit more. So I would turn the game on, like a lot of people, turn the audio down, turn Marty and Joe on, and just sit there, order pizza and sit there and keep score of the game. And had a time in my life doing it. It was, but yeah, I followed it all the way through, and I've become, I'm a big time reverse psychology Reds fan. These last 10 years have just beaten me. I'm not going to go away.
You're not alone.
I'm not going away. I'll never go away, but I become very, okay, all right, here we go again. That kind of way. I think the last team that I really felt really good about, the team last year was fun, but they were young. The last team that I was like, this team could make a run was when Scott Rowland came into the clubhouse.
Yep.
And we had Adam Dunn and King Griffey Jr., those big names, and it just never quite materialized. We had young Jay Bruce, and Scott Rowland came in, and I don't know him. I've never spoken to him, but I just watched him on the field. He looked like just a badass, and I think people were afraid of him.
Yes.
And I think it really rubbed off on the team. And I just don't know if that still exists. I don't know if you're allowed to have that, but they're very hot and cold. They just can't seem to put anything together for a week or two. So, and I know they've had some injuries, but this really started before the injuries.
Trags here. I want to tell you about Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Imagine turning $10 into $1,000 almost instantly. And if you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week, from lowering select players' stats projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit, or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. It's fun, it's simple, it's easy. 3 things that are a slam dunk for me. Speaking of slam dunk, I won recently, playing Caitlin Clark for more than 3.5 3-pointers made, and Brianna Stewart going for more than 23 points. Download the Prize Picks apps today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. So, I tell Charlie Goldsmith, because Charlie does kind of like what I do, covering the Reds and the Bengals. We both cover both clubs. And I told him that, in my estimation, that's what the Reds need. They need someone, a leader who can come in and kind of be the no-nonsense leader, what's acceptable, the way you go about preparing day in and day out. Because in baseball, sure, you have that in football, but in baseball, it's a day in, day out sport, and games are played almost every day. And people forget that Scott Rowland trade was made at the trade deadline in 2009. The Reds were pretty much out of it in 2009. They weren't going anywhere. And people were, why did they go out and get Scott Rowland, who's, approaching, the latter part of his career? Why did they do that? We found out in 2010 why they did that. And I kind of think that's where maybe Nick Krall could go with this club in the second half of the season.
That would be huge. I don't know who's out there that might fit that. I kept hoping that India could become that guy. I think he was in a better position last year. Matt McClain doesn't quite have that personality. Obviously, he's been out all year. But I just looking at all this, the young talent, and not knowing them all that well yet. Steer's a quiet guy. He's an incredibly talented guy, but I don't know if that's his role. I don't know Matt McClain well enough. When he played last year, he everyone's talking about Ellie, and I get it. I mean, last night, another example of just a wow factor. And I don't mean just the bomb. The hustle, going to second base. I mean, the guy does everything. But again, he's just kind of young, and I feel like, Ron Gant kind of guy. Like, can you find somebody out there that can just come in, like you said, set an example? This is how we travel. This is what we do on the road. This is how we take batting practice. This is what we do on deck. These are all the things you do, and hopefully they see that that's a need. And David Bell is I don't know David Bell. I just watch him manage. He seems like kind of this new era of a player's manager. He just seems like he's very upbeat, very positive towards them. No matter what mistakes they make, I feel like he's patting them on the back, always with the media. When they were going through that rut, when they basically took themselves out of being in the brace, every time I'd wait for him to go Lou Piniella and throw something at somebody.
He's not going to do that.
No, he's just, we got to keep working, and I'm just like, man, that's when you wish there was a guy in that clubhouse that would get in a fight, do something, like create some fire.
I talked to Rob Dibble about this. The reason I think he is the ideal manager for the Reds is this team is so young. They're going to have ups and downs. And when they go into a prolonged losing streak, he's not going to panic. And I think when they're going really, really well, he's not going to be overly enthusiastic. He wants the team to stay with the process. And I do think in this day and age, that is very beneficial. I want to go from second gear to fifth gear with you right here.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on Joe Burrow and what it's going to take for him.
Yeah.
Speaking of leaders.
Yeah.
I mean, he is the most important athlete in the city.
Well, I've watched Joe for a long time, and I don't know if I've ever seen, I've seen a lot of college quarterbacks, but I don't know if I've ever seen a year that he enjoyed in 2019 in Baton Rouge. And it wasn't just the national championship. It was going to a Thursday practice and watching he and Joe Brady, who was his young offensive coordinator at the time, and Jamar Chase and, Jefferson and Moss, the tight end, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the running back. This is after practice on a Thursday, another hour inside the red zone. And Joe is just almost like a surgeon. Him and Joe Brady, they would call something out, and to watch, the guys by then, they weren't busting it, but everybody was getting on the same page, to the point that when they got into the red zone, I felt like they could close their eyes and execute. I mean, it's the coolest thing I've ever seen, because the amount of work that they put in. And I loved how Joe would get almost, how dare you, to a defensive coordinator if he tried to fool him or blitz him or do something.
Or zero him. Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh, you're going to do that? Like dead serious.
Right.
Like, you're going to do that to us. Okay. And then come back, with vengeance. And so I remember walking with him we did a thing for the national championship, and I was like, man, and again, cynical, support the Bengals, but I'm cynical, especially when I'm with friends and family. I'm like, you ready to go to Cincinnati? Yeah, because I know him pretty well. I was like, a lot of guys go there. It's like a black hole. You go there,
right, never
to be heard from again. He's like, I don't care. If I go there, great. You know how he is because you've been around him. Yeah. I go there, great. What's happened in the past? And I was just we weren't on mic. I was just BSing with him before we got started. He just always had, I feel like I walked out of his career in college and I was like, that guy, and I watched Brady, I've watched everybody. I was like, that guy doesn't want to just beat you. Like, he wants to steal your soul for having the audacity to challenge him. Like, he really has that in his wiring. And so when he went to Cincinnati, I was like, okay, we're about to find out one of the greatest players I've ever covered going to a franchise notorious for just things not working out, especially at that position, although Carson Palmer was great. And you watch him, and then he's get the injuries. They can't protect him. Even when Super Bowl year, go back and really watch some of the film of those games. I mean, what he did was amazing, because that line wasn't probably even average by NFL standards. And yet he's getting the ball out. He knows exactly where to attack. I feel like he and Zach, they really understand each other. I think Zach did a really good job of studying LSU to understand that, to take what he had from the Rams and what Joe was really comfortable with, kind of mixing that together and putting it out there. I can't imagine what Joe would be doing if he did have just an average to above average offensive line. Hopefully with the moves they've made, on paper, it looks like it'll be his best offensive line that he's had since he's been there. I went to dinner with him maybe a month or two ago with Sam and another guy in town. And, the whole time I honestly had forgotten what his injury was. I have so many data points of people. I couldn't remember if it was a knee or a whatever. And, he had just, he was kind of keeping things close to his vest, but you could tell he was optimistic about being okay and right. All the steps he needed to take. He had checked all those boxes. I haven't seen it since, OTAs or their mini camps, how things have gone. I've seen some stuff you've done and Charlie and others have done. I mean, it looks optimistic. The T. Higgins drama hopefully will be put on the back burner for a year. They've got the pieces. I love the kid Brown from Illinois. I think he could give you a charge that they haven't had back there. He's taken most of the reps. So, I love the pieces. It's just a matter of can the guy stay healthy? And if he can, I guess like you could say about Mahomes or any of these guys, if he's out there, they're definitely going to be in the postseason mix. And
what is
of getting hot at the right time?
What does Jermaine Burton mean potentially to taking the top off the defense? You've seen him more than anybody else at Alabama. What can he do?
Well, he's the real deal. He's very different than Tyler Boyd. Obviously, he'll be asked to do different things, but for fans that don't really know much about him, he is the vertical threat. He's got great ball skills with the ability to adjust back to the ball and either catch it or draw that interference, which is a huge advantage in the NFL with all the, before it's just 15 yards, now it's spotted the foul. He's got a little bit of an edge to him that on the field, if he can channel it in the right way, it's great. But as we've seen in Pittsburgh with George Pickens, sometimes that emotion and that passion can go in the wrong direction. And so that would be my one asterisk I would put next to him. Tremendous upside. What did he go? 3rd round, 4th round? I can't remember where he went.
He went 3rd round, and he was a Bengals slot.
He's a first round talent. First round talent.
Yes.
Without a question, the league just was like, I can't do it. Let's go get this guy. And it's probably why go back and look at all those receivers. Now, does he have the talent to sit there and make a list of guys that went ahead of him and 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, sit there and use that, put it on his wristband and get motivated by that? Sure. He's a freak. I mean, very gifted, really live legs. And like we talked about, he's not just a deep threat. I mean, he can catch the deep crosser. He's a complete receiver. Him and Joe got to get on the same page. And hopefully Jamar or T, somebody can put their arm around him. And like we were talking about with the Reds, just kind of show him the way of being a professional. And if you're not getting the ball or you have 2 catches for 8 yards and the team wins, it's a good day. And if you have 10 catches and 180 yards and 2 scores and they lose, that's not a great day. Maybe internally you're okay with it, but that's not a good day. If he can get in line with that mentality, then man, it'd be exciting to see what he can do.
Well, this Bengal offense, if Burton can be that guy, Kirk, this is the best offense Joe Burrow has had in terms of weapons. And we haven't even talked about Mike Gesicki, who is not your typical tight end. He's not CJ Uzomah.
No.
He's not why am I blanking on the name of the guy who went to Carolina, left the Bengals for the Panthers? I'm completely blanking on it.
Hayden Hurst.
Excuse me?
I think it's Hayden Hurst.
Oh, Hayden Hurst. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hayden Hurst. He's not that.
Those guys, this guy is almost a receiver volleyball player playing tight end, as you know. I mean, he could be a real threat if they're worried about those safeties, worried about T and Jamar and Jermaine Burton. The middle of the field could be wide open for a big. I don't know how tall he is, 6'5", 6'6". I mean, he's a great threat down the middle of the field, which again they haven't had since he's been there.
When people ask me what makes Joe Burrow a different quarterback than anyone else in the NFL, especially when you're talking about the elites, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, you name it.
Yeah.
It's the processing. And Zach is always talking about what makes Joe Burrow the different quarterback is his ability to process before the ball is even snapped.
Yeah, I think pre-snap.
Process.
Pre-snap
and post-snap. Is that what you see from Burrow? Is that what differentiates Joe Burrow?
And how many years did you cover Brady?
So I covered Brady from his start in 2000 through 2020. We left at the same time, Kirk.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
I appreciate
what a
that.
run.
Yeah.
What a run that was.
By the way, so on Brady, the similarity I see between the two is their intense competitive
spirit. Yeah.
No question. They are both like that anecdote that you shared during practice on Thursday. That's Brady.
Yeah.
That how dare you? Yeah. That's Brady.
100%.
I mean, Peyton's great, obviously, Kirk. Peyton's a first ballot Hall of Fame. Nobody's sitting, but totally different in terms of the competitiveness and the edge. And that's where I think.
Also, the reason I ask you about that, the competitiveness without it, those two playing ping pong, they should put that on pay-per-view. That would be great. Brady against Burrow because of that mindset. But to me, Tom Brady, because they threw Drew Henson at Tom Brady when we were covering at Michigan, and Drew Henson was a 10-star quarterback, Yankees. It was like, and they took Lloyd Carr took Tom Brady off the field to play this freshman. And Tom had to get through that. But just to watch how he handled that and then to watch how his career ended, I couldn't have ever said Tom Brady's going to become Tom Brady. but there was just something about his fire that you weren't used to seeing from any Michigan quarterback. Not many quarterbacks at all, like the headbutt and the intensity on his face. Like, it was just, I thought it was because he was so pissed off about Henson. I didn't know it was just who he is, right? His wiring and how he competes. And that's my favorite thing about him. But his greatest strength as far as on the field, besides the spirit, is what you just described about Joe to me. His ability to process. He did a thing the other day with Colin Cowherd, and he was talking about, the ability to see something pre-snap. Oh, they're in too high. That means that. And he was just just fired it away. Right. To me, that's what Joe does. That's exactly what Joe does. And I don't know if Joe gets enough credit for being that guy, because maybe it's because Mahomes is on top of the mountain. Maybe it's because when he interviews, he's not always the most comfortable interview. So he kind of soft-spoken.
He gray rocks, Kirk. You know what gray rocking is?
No, what's that?
Gray rocking, my lovely bride, Deborah Ann, told me about gray rocking. It's when you take all emotion out of an answer and don't give them anything. And obviously, Bill would always say this in New England. He would always say, don't give them anything. Answer the question, but don't give them anything. That's what he meant. And that's what Joe Burrow does. He'll be pleasant. He will show a little personality 100%. Here and there, no question. Yeah. But he will not feed in to a narrative.
Here's what's crazy. When he's away from that, he's the same way.
Right.
I think
I'm not surprised by that, by the way.
Even with his boys, I think he can be that way, which Brady came across totally the opposite. Yes. Brady came across like, beers are chilling at my house, great win, see you over there, first one there, jump in the pool. That's how Brady came across. That's where they separate. There's no way. Correct. Joe is not in that world. He'll go to a UFC thing. He'll sit there with his shades on. He'll be cordial to anybody that comes up to him. He's not like get away. So he's but I just don't think he's comfortable. I think he loves being in Cincinnati instead of New York. Let's put it to you that way.
I actually think it's a perfect fit for Joe. Yeah. Because he can do his thing, leave town, have fun.
Low profile by NFL
come back here. And yes, he's a superstar. Yes, he's the man in Cincinnati. But he can live, I don't want to say an anonymous life. That's not right. But he can live a low-key life. And Joe likes that.
Yeah. Yeah. If he's pumping his gas and he's playing in New York, everyone's filming him pumping his gas. It's like he couldn't do anything in one of these big cities. So I think his personality and his background fits perfectly with being in Cincinnati. But hey, let's knock on wood. I think he could have a great year. I know he's got a chip on his shoulder about how last year ended. And I think he's fired up and ready to go. So anytime Joe Burrow's fired up, if that's your quarterback on your team, get ready. Keep him healthy, and he'll do some crazy things this year.
Mike Petraglia, Trags here. One of my very favorite summertime experiences happened 15 years ago when I took my two daughters, Janie and Emma, to their first Cincinnati Reds baseball game. It wasn't so much the game on the field that they were that interested in. It was bugging good old Dad to take them to the concession stand for that hot dog and, yes, that soda. Maybe watch the game a little bit here and there, but really it was all about the experience of taking in a baseball game. Well, now through Game Time, you can take your family to a baseball game and enjoy that very same experience. With the Game Time app, there are last-minute tickets, flash deals, and zone deals. Easy to find and buy MLB tickets for every kind of event in your area. There's views from all seats in the venue, and there's a lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, and job loss protection as well. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, making getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. You know what I've always wondered about you, Kirk Herbstreit? I've wondered how you played in the best rivalry in American sports, period, end of story. I don't want to hear Red Sox Yankees. I just don't want to hear that. It's Michigan, Ohio State. When you stopped doing that and you became a national broadcaster and did all of these games and covered Michigan, I believe you were at a photo shoot in Ann Arbor today, right?
Yeah.
That's where you were coming from.
Yep.
How did you leave your Ohio State days behind and morph into an objective broadcaster, even when Ohio State's playing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've gotten that a bunch over the years.
I'm sure you have.
You know, I feel like 80 to 90% of Ohio State fans appreciate the objectivity. And then there's that 10 to 20% that, you know, think I'm a traitor. You know, you got that. I looked at people I respected on air, you know, and watched people that I wanted to listen to on a national level. And I never heard them talk about we or their team or whatever it might be. I just heard them talk about the game, no matter who they were talking about. And I think I always try to put myself at home with the viewer and try to understand what they're seeking, what they want to hear, what they may disagree with me, but you got to remember, Mike, Desmond Howard won a Heisman. He was a Super Bowl MVP. David Pollock was a 3-time All-American. I mean, Tony Romo played for the Cowboys. Troy Aikman, like most of these guys that are in my space are really well known for what they did on the field. And so first of all, I never wanted to be, the way we're talking right now is how I talk on air. I never wanted to have a shtick. I never wanted to be a homer. I just wanted to be, I tackled, no one knows who I am, again, on a national level. No one knows who I am in 1996. No one. And instead of being embarrassed about that, I attacked it. And I thought, okay, no one's going to outwork me when it comes to my preparation for this broadcast, whether it's studio or the game. So my brand is going to become, I don't know who that guy is, but damn, he's got a lot of information. And by chance, we talked about all these other great broadcasters I worked with. I sat next to the greatest entertainer in sports television history in 1996, a guy named Lee Corso. Yep. This is before, social media and people that are now trying to be hot take people. Lee was crazy. Like Lee said things that I would never say. I thought they hired me to be a football analyst, football. And this guy's saying stuff like Arkansas, Michigan, pickup trucks against the Cadillac. I'm going with the pickup trucks. I'm like, meanwhile, I spent hours on that game trying to get a hold of Lloyd Carr and this guy in 30 seconds. And that's the most memorable comment you can make. But that happened every week, every comment. And so my point is, I'm a football junkie that learned to, whether it's Ohio State or Michigan, I'm going to break it down. I'm going to give you the way it is. But I learned I can never be Lee Corso. I can never be who he is naturally. But what he taught me was I have a kind of a dry personality, or dry, I don't want to say personality, but it's like, if you get to know me, I throw jabs and I was like, right. Am I allowed to do that on air? Or you got to remember, it's a different generation. Yes. And I started to do that a little bit, and I got more and more comfortable letting my personality out, which is still respectful, but fun. And I just learned by sitting next to Lee. Again, he would talk about Florida State like and he went to Florida State. Like he would get mad at him. He would just scold. I would never do that. Like he would make it personal and attack. But sitting next to him and hearing him, how he talked about every team, I just learned that last thing Michigan or Texas or USC people want to hear me talking about we or like, I can't do that. I'm going to talk about them like every other team. And so I think what got lost in all that was I'm the biggest Ohio State fan my whole life. I still am. My kids are. My wife is. She cheered there. My dad played there. He was a captain. No one's ever been a bigger Ohio State fan than me. That doesn't mean I can't objectively break them down and pick against them if I have to. And
you wouldn't be doing your job if you didn't. Kirk.
Yeah.
And that's what I know a lot of Ohio State fans, and like there's that section of fans that you described would absolutely be ticked off if you start criticizing them. They'll take it personally. I mean, like, this isn't personal. It's my job to actually assess what I see from a professional perspective and deliver that to the audience. But they're never ever. It's go Bucks, go Bucks, go Bucks.
OHIO. And I would say over the years that Ohio State, not when I say this, I don't mean all Ohio State fans, because that 80% Ohio State fan, when their team loses, they're heartbroken. They feel for the coach. They feel for the players. That 20%, when the Ohio State loses, they want to fire the coach, get rid of the quarterback. He's the worst. The ref sucks. Find out where that ref lives. Like every fan base has
they get triggered.
Every fan base has that 15 or 20% that's embarrassing to the loyal fans. But they're angry. Those Ohio State fans are angry no matter what. If they win, they're cussing out the team online on some chat room that they beat, making fun of them. If they lose, they want to fire Ryan Day and get rid of CJ Stroud and get rid of he sucks. And it's just they're never happy. So how can if that person's never happy, why am I going to spend 1 second worrying about that doofus who's always upset about everything? So I'm going to prepare. Like last year's Michigan team, as just a fan of football, how can you not enjoy how they went about? They don't have 5 stars everywhere. They recruited, they developed, they had a senior class, and they put a run together. God bless them. I mean, I enjoy watching teams that play for each other. Like last night, we watched the Panthers. I don't know if you saw it after the game.
Oh, yeah.
Every player, the coach got emotional, talking about how I've been in a lot of different places. This place is different, man. We care about each other. These guys love each other. And he's like, I know everyone says that, but it's like, it's legit. And when you watched how they celebrated with the cup, I was like, I don't know, other than Bob Broski, who used to be on my team, the Blue Jackets, other than that, that's what I love about team sports. So I was like so proud and happy for the Panthers, just because I respect what it takes to be a team and not be selfish and to come together for a common goal and to go achieve it. So if it's Michigan, so be it. I respect greatness, and I respect teams that put their selfish agenda behind them and focus on winning. It's great.
Certainly the Bengals have been impressed with Michigan over the last 3 years, I guess. I mean, their defense could have 4 to 5 starters, maize and blue. What do you think of Chris Jenkins real quick?
Dominant. Dad played, great hands, great quickness. Is a guy that's not going to just be Aaron Donald and just like I'm the baddest man on the field. I'm the twitchiest player in the D line. But if you spend too much time worrying about other guys and he gets a one-on-one opportunity, he's dangerous. But he's got great feet, great hands, and like you said about Michigan Pete, these players, he plays with a high motor, which you love to see as defensive linemen. We're
going to finish up with this. I want you to talk about your sons and what it's like what it has been like watching them play a sport you love, a sport you study. When you watch them as a parent, how is it different?
Well, I'm like any other parent. I'm terrified. I'm worried. It's much easier to be on the field than to be in the stands watching. It's on one hand, it's great because that's what they want. My dad taught me this, how he handled me. My dad played at Reading High School. Mm-hmm. He played with Claude Osteen, and he was great in track. He played every sport back in those days. He went to Ohio State. He was a captain. When I came up, he was, and I was pretty good at sports. He was very standoffish. He was not, you're doing this, the way a lot of parents are today. It's like, if this is what you want to do, go for it, and I'll support you. And I really kept that. I had 4 sons. Yeah, I encouraged it when they were little. Yeah, I introduced it to them when they were little. But if they would have been like that, I'd rather play the piano. I'd have been like, all right, we're going to go crush this piano. Let's go do that. Like, so I was not pushing anything on them. But once they kind of went down the path that they wanted to play, I just supported them. The coolest thing for me, and ESPN's been great about this, is I will, I'll do Thursday night football. I'll fly to game day, and then I'll fly to wherever my sons, but it used to be Nashville. I'd go back to get back to see them in person. So the thing I just cherish, instead of turning it on, nowadays you can just put it on a laptop and dial it up. I got to 99% of their games. And I'm just so thankful to be in a position to do what I'm doing and get back. Like my son Chase, he's going to be a senior at St. X, and he's played the last couple of years. And, here I am getting back to see him. And, just being a parent, just putting on my St. X half zip and hat on, cheering for everybody, and just trying to, be there for them. And after the game, win or lose, give them a big hug and get on a plane and fly back to where I was. And man, I can't even describe. I mean, I love calling games. It's fun with Al Michaels and all these guys, but just to be able to be there and just sit there and watch, like any of you or anybody else that's been able to do that with their kids, those are the memories that I'll never forget. I mean, those are the memories that are my favorite, so it's been fun. It's been a fun journey.
This has been an incredibly fun discussion, Kirk. I really, really appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
And I have like a list of notes because, like yourself, I try to do my prep work before before the mic comes on.
Yeah.
And I didn't, get to the last quarter.
Well, we'll circle back if once the Bengals I'm doing the Indy game. I think that's an Amazon.
Yes, the last preseason game. Yeah. That's correct.
So we'll have to maybe hook up there. We'll hook up in person there. But if you want to do something, if the Reds accidentally get into the wild card, or the Bengals start things going in September, be happy to hop on again.
I really appreciate it, because there's one guy we did not get to, and I want to dedicate and do the due diligence and spend the time it deserves. Your dad's relationship with Woody Hayes. Yeah. I probably could do the whole podcast on that, because I grew up. Look, I'm a Woody guy. I'm a Woody Hayes guy. Yeah, and grew up with him, and you know where I'm coming from. But this has been a blast, Kirk. Thank you so much.
Of course. Yeah, thank you, and welcome back to Cincinnati, and keep up the great work, and best of luck. I don't know when you're getting married, but best of luck to you.
Once we get the house situation settled, because this day is the second day of our move.
Oh,
town. Yes. So we're trying to get settled, Kirk, and you were top priority. I wanted to get the Kirk Herbstreit podcast on, and
tell her I appreciate you making the time,
moving boxes. But
text me anytime that you want to get together again. Love to do it. I really enjoyed it.
Sounds good, Kirk. He is Kirk Herbstreit. You can see his work all over the place on different platforms like ESPN, ABC, Prime Video, and of course, the voice of EA Sports. Kirk Herbstreit, thanks again.
You got it. Take care.
All right. He's Kirk Herbstreit. I'm Mike Petraglia, Trags. Want to thank everybody for downloading this episode of the Jungle Roar podcast, powered by the Game Time app and Prize Picks. And thanks, of course, to the folks at CLNS Media. Talk to you next week.